Welcome to Man Cove Wellbeing and the My Trauma, Your Trauma series with me, Owen Morgan. I want to share my trauma journey and that of others. We will also look at the world of trauma healing, support and research, including guests who specialise in helping those overcome their trauma. My Trauma, Your Trauma is here to explore human experience. Welcome to Trauma Chat, where we invite on a guest to talk all things trauma. Please watch and listen with care. Some of this content may be triggering or may make you feel uncomfortable, so do press that stop button and take a break. Always put yourself first. I'm a mental health advocate and a massage therapist, and I've interviewed hundreds of wellness experts over the last 5 years, and I want to give a voice to those who can inspire others to improved wellness. So today in episode 5, I do apologise. I'm here with Sarah Wainwright, who writes for the Sydney Observer magazine on parenting-orientated topics with a psychological underpinning. She has a BSc psychology and a postgraduate diploma psychology, and she has also volunteered as a telephone crisis counsellor with Lifeline Australia and Tokyo English Lifeline. Sarah is also involved with training and supervision of new recruit crisis counsellors. She has also volunteered in schools working with children with additional needs. Oh, that was quite a mouthful. I pulled it off. But welcome to the show, Sarah. How are you?
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for all your support so far with everything Man Cove is doing, and I'm really excited to work with you more, especially with our magazine show. So everybody that's watching, go and check out episode 1. We're hoping Sarah's going to be involved in episode 2. Very, very exciting. So how is, obviously this is in amongst the pandemic times, obviously crazy times in the world. How has it been in Australia for you?
It's been quite good. We flattened our curve, which was what our federal and state governments have wanted us to do. So the citizens have been adhering to all the regulations. And we have just heard on the news tonight that public schools will go back full time as of next week. So pretty excited about that. Very for us and the kids. So I've got 4 children. So my eldest is at university, and that's all online. And then I've got 2 in high school, and they're partially at school and partially at home. And then my youngest, who's 7, she's mostly been at home, and then she'll be back to school next week. So it has been a very interesting time. I think the whole world, we're just all in the same boat, and thankful for good health, devastated for people who have lost their lives. Just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like you said, we have to try and hold on to some resemblance of, gratitude and what we do have, and not, living in a state of fear. That's the key, isn't it? Is to do that, especially for our kids too. Like you said, there's the pressure of homeschooling and being there for them all day long. But also we need to look after their mental health too, don't we? With being away from their friends. And my little 4-year-old, it's tough for him.
Yes.
He hasn't been in nursery for 7 weeks, and that's a big age, there's a lot going on there. But we're going to be talking about parenting and children anyway today, so it seems a very relevant thing to mention before we do this. But obviously we found each other on Instagram, sort of liked a few of each other's posts, and I really loved what you were doing. And, as a stepdad and all of the things that are involved in the mental side of that and trying to adjust, I felt it'd be really, really great to talk to somebody who has a parenting underpinning to them, so we can get into today and talking about trauma-informed parenting and various other things. But we'll let this flow as it needs to, as always. But before we get into sort of the topics in hand, do you want to quickly let us know a little bit more about what you're doing for the Sydney Observer magazine and how that came about and where you are today kind of with your work?
Basically, after I graduated from university, my husband and I moved overseas, which was about 14 years ago. And we had our children, they were all born and raised overseas. And then we came back to Sydney, and between each of my children, I've, tried to get back into the workforce, and mostly I've been volunteering because I've been the trailing spouse. And when you live overseas, only one person is the sponsored person for employment. And then we came back home, and I basically was looking for a niche for myself, and I just explored various writing opportunities and was given the opportunity with Sydney Observer, where I was able to write sort of in that lifestyle or wellness field. And because of my background in psychology and then my experience with the 4 kids ranging in 18 down to 7, I appeared to be quite a good candidate to be one of their contributors. So I've been writing for them for just over 2.5 years now.
That's amazing. And, you know, kind of what's the background for Sydney Observer magazine then? What's the origin story for that?
They're a locally produced magazine here on Sydney's North Shore. They call themselves a boutique lifestyle magazine, but they're actually very active in the local community and promoting local businesses and local interest groups, seniors, aged care, our local hospitals. And so it's also very community oriented, which is something that also really appealed to me.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And it must tie in really nicely to what you're doing with your Instagram page, your parenting tips page. So is that, how does that look, the Instagram page? And if anybody wants to come and follow, what will they gain from it?
So actually, I write on a broad range of topics. I've written on existential loneliness. I've written on providing what is boundaries and limit setting. I have written on grief. I've written on on also educational topics such as play-based learning. I've written on optimism. I've attended a speech by Dr. Martin Seligman, who is very, very large in the positive psychology scene. I've written on that. So my Instagram, are you happy for me to tell you my Instagram handle?
Yeah, of course, do it.
Thank you. So that's _ parenting tips _ and that's basically where I write, and it's all my observations and experience that I may have had a conversation with somebody. I may have seen something in the media. I've recently written a social media post as well as an article on social media, because social media is often demonized, and I don't think that that's an entirely fair assessment. I think there's huge benefits in social media. And so I wanted to write about that, and I wrote about that in one of my articles for Sydney Observer, because I just wanted to present a more balanced view, especially for parents with teenage children.
Yeah, it's really lovely that you've done that, because like you said, it's not black and white as it appears to be with social media. And I've been able to leverage it to really, really help people get their message out there and help people, work on their self-development journey too. Man Cove Wellbeing doesn't exist without social media, really, at the end of the day. Especially, I have a YouTube channel, but I need to post it somewhere. So I do need Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. And to be honest, I got very lucky. I've never had any, toxic abuse or anything on social media so far. So I feel very blessed to have avoided any of that. But like you said, there needs to be some balance with everything, really, especially with social media. So that's amazing. Thank you so much. Everybody go and check out the Instagram page for that one. Give them a follow, as always. So today we're going to be talking about trauma from a parenting perspective. But the question I always ask every single guest that comes on is, for you, what is trauma? I'm really intrigued to know what your concept of trauma. What is it, in your opinion?
Firstly, I guess it does differ for different people. However, for me, I think it's about a hole that can't be filled. And it's funny because I follow another Facebook page called North Brisbane Psychologists, and they're fantastic. And they said, can you get over your trauma better if you are walking along, if you have loved ones or walking alongside loved ones? And the first comment was, you can't get over trauma. And That actually really resonated with me. And I said that I agree. I don't think you really get over it. You live with the hole, but you find ways to build around it. And you're not completely defined by the trauma, but somehow or other the trauma lives within you. And you have to find a way to build your life around that trauma. But I don't think the idea of fixing it or curing it is, I don't think that that's very helpful.
Yeah, it's a really, really good way to look at it, actually, and it's a bit of a different answer now. And it's whenever someone answers the question, it's always awesome, regardless. And I really like what you've done there. And it made me think just briefly about, I was listening to Body Keeps a Score again on Audible, because I just love it. And he was talking about dual existence, how there's kind of this part of us, which is, there may be some traumas along the way, like you said, that it's kind of with you. But then with this dual existence, you've got the proactive version of you right now that's, paying the bills and having a job and having social interaction. But there's like this dual existence, and it's that coming together of the two that can allow you to live a rich life. And it's like I say, it's not about necessarily getting rid of anything. It's about processing and making peace with it. But that isn't to say it's not going to be there at all. It's all part of our rich experience, isn't it, to where we are today? It shapes us. So if we removed everything that shaped us, I'm not sure what we'd be left with, to be honest with you. Be a bit of a strange concept, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's sort of, and of course it will vary over the lifetime, but trying to sort of have it somewhat integrated. And there'll be times when it doesn't integrate well within ourselves. And then there'll be other times when we do seem to be able to live with it a little more comfortably. I think it's, you sort of almost walk, rather like somebody who will walk alongside another person and their trauma, you actually almost have to do that to yourself. You actually walk alongside your own trauma.
Yeah, and it takes a level of awareness, doesn't it? A level of sort of being able to come into yourself and seeing it in the moment, that kind of stuff. That's kind of sometimes the hardest part, is self-awareness, because we don't want to have self-awareness because it's painful, it hurts. But like you said, if you're walking alongside others that can hold a space for you, make you feel safe, you can certainly hold this with safety. I'm a big advocate for the power of safety, obviously. All us humans need it. So for you personally, in your lifetime, have you suffered with it, seen people in your family suffer with it, or externally with friends? How has trauma informed your life up to this point?
I did have a traumatic childhood. My father left my mother when I was 8, and basically abandoned my mother, my brother, and myself. And he then kicked us out of the house and told us never to return. And, well, my mother was enormously traumatized, and she had a complete mental health breakdown. And then a few months later, she was diagnosed with hepatitis, and she was given 2 weeks to live. And basically, I was the person who sat by her bed and kept her bedside vigil. And my father wasn't on the scene, and there was quite a lot of psychological abuse as well as neglect. And it was a huge amount of responsibility on my shoulders to walk that journey with her at a very young age. That's sort of the crux of what happened. And we also had, I sort of lived with chronic instability, because I've lived overseas I've lived more overseas for more than half my life, and I'm 50. So there was always a state of impermanence, and no family, no support, no community. We were living as expatriates in Singapore and Indonesia. My mother's family was all in Kenya in Africa. My father was from England. And my brother and I needed to go to high school. And so that's how we came here to Australia. But none of those places could we call home.
Yeah, that's coming back down to safety again, as well as having somewhere that you always reside to, a place that over time becomes that sacred space, doesn't it? And you didn't have an opportunity to do that. And it sounds like you would have had to have grown up quickly then, with everything that was happening with your mum. What kind of age was that then, that you were having to sort of care for her as such?
It started from the age of 8 when
Wow. Okay.
And basically I sort of, I feel as though I raised her really. And in many ways I was robbed of my childhood because my mother was in such dire straits and we'd lost one parent, and my father just never returned essentially. And the only person we had to hold on to was my mum, but she was in she was depressed, and we just had a chronic instability in terms of our own, where we were living, which country we were living in. We had no sense of belonging, and that causes children a great amount of angst.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I can't imagine that. Everyone has their own version of their childhood, don't they? But time and time again, you hear these stories of kids having to grow up way too quickly, and not getting their needs met, their developmental needs met, because they're being an adult at that point. And I guess it can turn out in different ways as an adult. And these two questions kind of intertwine, because we're looking at how that trauma has informed your way of being as an adult, and then informing your way of being a parent too. So after all of that happened, and you got through school and you went into your 20s and stuff, what was life for you like then? Did you have big impacts from that childhood, or did you manage to sort of not heal's obviously totally the wrong word, but you know what I mean, get yourself back on track?
They did take a toll. I had an eating disorder. I had anorexia for 8 years, and I was extremely unwell. My first marriage broke down. I was divorced at the age of 24, having gone out with my first husband, for 8 years. I hadn't been married to him for 8 years, but that was, the end of a very long and it was a stable relationship. But I was very young, and what I was looking for was parents. And that's not a good reason to get married. And I saw counsellors and I saw therapists for years and years to try and get myself sorted out, because I knew that there was something terribly wrong. So, that's basically how I sort of managed to pull myself together. And then I went to university, and I think just that real inward focus where I wanted to study and to make a difference in my own life was healing. It was definitely healing and very restorative. And then, but I think for me, it's an ongoing thing. And definitely, as you and I have discussed before, when you have your own children, that stuff that you feel as though you've sort of dealt with, you may as well just hold a mirror on your face and have it shone straight back in your eyes again.
Yeah, they bring you straight back to reality sometimes, don't they? You think you've got it all sorted out, and then they trigger you somehow. Something from the past. You're like, oh God, I didn't realize I hadn't. But I guess they say sometimes they're our greatest teachers, aren't they, children? Because they're just so raw and unconditional, aren't they? It's just so human. It's amazing. So is that what led you into psychology then? Kind of the interest in human experience and what you've been through?
Yeah, I think it did. I wanted to understand how the mind works, and what difference one can make in your own life with your thinking, your cognition, and potentially the difference that you can make in other people's lives by being a good counsellor, by being a good listener, and by understanding, some of the processes, some of the psychological processes. So that is what took me down that path. And it's been very gratifying.
Yeah, I bet. And you probably, like me, just love learning about human experience.
Yes.
It keeps you going. Because that's probably why I just love it. I love talking to people like yourself, just because I just love to sponge it all, because we're so fascinating, aren't we?
We are.
It's so complex. But also, living a life could be fairly simple needs, somewhere to live, something to eat, and a family to connect to, It sounds simple, but it really isn't that simple. So how do you feel, sorry if I don't want to rush you in any way, so we'll just go with the flow, but how do you think your trauma experience as a kid and, everything you learned through psychology, how has that informed your parenting? Has it informed your parenting? Do you think, is it made you a better parent, in inverted commas?
I'm definitely always trying to do better. Well, I think when, and I think I mentioned this to you briefly earlier as well, that when my first daughter was about 5 weeks old, 4 or 5 weeks old, she was a very, very settled baby. I was, I practiced attachment parenting. She was literally, attached to me pretty much 24 hours a day, which was wonderful. I just loved and adored it. And she was fast asleep in the car, and my husband and I stepped out of the car, and I started to become very, very anxious and agitated because she thought I had abandoned her. There's no chance that she thought that. She was fast asleep, her tummy was full, she was warm, settled, content, loved the works. And at that point, I thought, this is my stuff that I've projected onto her, that doesn't belong to her, it belongs to me. And, that's something that I've tried to be very aware of. And as parents, there is stuff that belongs to us, ourselves exclusively. It doesn't necessarily belong to our children.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of projection going on. It's needs met again, isn't it, as well? If you didn't get your needs met, you're probably overly thinking getting their needs met as a consequence, rather than it just being sort of a natural development of attachment. And that's why it's such a complicated process being a parent. It's not as simple as just having a child and doing your best to bring them up. There is a lot more to it than that. You have to be able to meet all of their needs, whatever those needs may be. And that's not easy if you're coming from a place within yourself which wasn't met. How do you know how to give that need if you haven't even had it before? And I talk about this a lot from a co-regulation perspective. It's on parents to be able to co-regulate with their children so they can teach them self-regulation tools. If you miss that whole thing out, you're not going to be able to co-regulate as an adult. So how are you going to co-regulate with your child if you weren't shown that? So again, it's complicated. We'll talk about that more later. But yeah, no, this is really good stuff. Thank you so much. And I know, obviously, from your time in the crisis lifeline stuff and everything we're doing there, I remember when we were talking before this, you mentioned something about being linked to foster care or people being in the foster care system. So how have you seen that develop, that kind of part of your life, hearing the stories and seeing other people going through these things? Yeah,
it's been a great privilege, to be honest. One of my closest friends here in Sydney is she's a foster carer, her and her family, they're foster carers. And I provide respite for her foster children. So they come to us overnight or through the middle of the day when her and her family have got other things that they need to do. And it's quite evident that there has been some gaps at times with these children. But what I notice is that after a period of time with my friend and her family, these children they're able to self-soothe. You're talking about the co-regulation. They are able to regulate their emotions and their behaviours better because they've been given that secure base and safe haven. They are far more resilient. So if they fall over and hurt themselves, it's not a full meltdown. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm okay. Nothing bad came of that. But the most telling thing is once they feel secure in the relationship, it's actually the physical distance that they're able to put between themselves and the caregiver. They don't need to sort of, hang on to her leg or literally be physically attached to her for fear of her leaving. As they're becoming more and more secure in the relationship, they're literally able to, play on the other side of the playground and just wave back, hi, everybody's fine. And that, to me, is the greatest sign of what secure attachment looks like.
Yeah, and I think, again, like we mentioned about social media earlier about getting a bad rap, I sometimes feel like the foster care system gets a bit of a bad rap too, because it's like any form of news. You only tend to hear the bad stuff, don't you? It's rare that you hear the good stuff in the news. And it's the same thing with, I feel, with this foster care system. So, and it's always portrayed badly in TV too, when they make TV shows about this stuff. And I feel like there must be so much beautiful things happening in the foster care system with caregivers. And they talk a lot about, ruptures in attachment being created previously in the child's life. Those ruptures are something that needs to be healed. ideally by the caregiver that caused it, but often that's not able to do that. But these ruptures can be repaired through safe spaces being held and the right human being able to, to allow the child to be seen, heard, and understood, right? They say they're the three key things, aren't they? Be seen, heard, and understood is a great way to feel safe. So I'd imagine from what you're saying, it sounds like the foster care system can be a very beautiful thing too for children if they're in the right homes. And is that what you've seen a lot of, the real joy behind it?
I have seen a lot of joy behind it, on the foster carer side and on the children's side, and the way it seems to work here in Australia, and I'm not an expert in this field, is that they do try very, very hard to maintain a relationship with the biological parents, and I think it's commendable. That's a very difficult thing to do, to not have cut off, for the child's sake and for the sake of the biological parents. So from what I've seen, there are certain circumstances where they're doing a very good job of that.
Yeah, and that's really, really good to hear, because I've often think about it. So, I've got my stepson, but I've always been intrigued to find out more about fostering and stuff, because I just felt like there must be so many children out there who just could have their lives transformed by just a healthy attachment, bare minimum. And that feels like such a powerful gift to give a child. But I'm very aware that I have things to process still, which is taking ownership and responsibility for your own stuff is really, really important before you bring children into the world. And yet we don't know all of it yet. And maybe the kids will show us that. But I think we owe it to ourselves, don't we, to be in the best possible position we can be to bring up a little human being, which is extremely important. And this feeds really nicely into the next question, which is we're going to have a deep dive into this now. It's going to take us probably quite a bit of time, but we're going to have a deep dive into sort of what we know from our own parenting experiences in regard to supporting kids and their well-being as they get older, and how we can work on ourselves too. So trauma-informed parenting style. So let's dive into that for a little while. It's the main body of this podcast today. So what did you on your parenting journey, what did you notice, things that came up for you that you were able to work through? Did you have any examples of that? Personally?
I think it's basically pretty much what I touched on before about, what belonged to me and my childhood and what's the circumstance for our children. I mean, another thing that happened to me when I was about 14 was I was quite violently assaulted in the city of Sydney. I was bashed up. I was bashed in the face, punched in the face, thrown to the ground, kicked, and I just fled for my life basically. And I was in boarding school, and there was no counselling offered. There was no respite. There was no time out for school, time out from school. There was nothing. It was, it was as if it just never happened. And so, but it does that one event, especially, that really did traumatize me deeply. I couldn't go. I was terrified to go back into the city again, and I was frightened of that street. I changed my hair. I never wore the same clothing again. And so now, some legacy of that is I am fearful of my older children going into the city of Sydney on their own. And that has been really hard. I'm so fearful of what happened to me happening to them. But they understand that. They understand that, why I'm afraid for their safety, and we've spoken about it. And thankfully nowadays there's phones. Everybody has a phone, which is fantastic. So it's, the thing with your children as they get older is it's a bit less cut and dry. There's a lot to be negotiated. So as my children, the older two, are older and they're more independent and they want to go into the city or they want to go further afield, we just create safe and healthy limits. Nothing good happens after 12 midnight.
Yeah.
There's and I've got very strict rules around, drinking or anything like that. There's no way they don't drink. But they do understand that is like a very triggering thing for me. But also, I don't want it to wreck their social life either. But we just have that conversation, and I think that that's probably one of the most important things, especially as your children are getting older, is just to continue to have that conversation. Once communication breaks down, the relationship, it's hard to maintain a very good relationship. So, and definitely as a parent, it's not my way or the highway. It absolutely is not, and the boundaries and the limit setting has to change as they get older.
Yeah, it's tricky, like you said, with the boundaries and being able to, like the communication, like you said, is huge, and it's all good saying you can't do this, you can't do that, but not actually being able to explain to them why is going to be a problem in the first place, because you need that open flow. And I find that, treating our children with a bit more respect, they're way more intelligent than we can give them credit for. My 4-year-old is just unbelievably intelligent, and he's picking up on everything. So we taught him everything. We taught him what human experience is. We taught him what his nervous system is, what to do with his emotions, to come and see us when he feels things, tell us about it. And we're hoping that's going to give him a good life. I'm like, hang on, if everybody was doing this, we'd probably have a much more, stable next generation. But I'm not entirely sure how to get the message out on a kind of grand scheme of things. But what you're talking about there is exactly that, is that family needs to be a team, don't they, rather than this hierarchy situation.
No,
I think it's much easier to it's much easier to do something when you're told what to do from a level of respect. If you respect the person, you're going to do it for them. Fear isn't always the way, and they say that in the army sector and the police and stuff, is that the most successful thing is to have that level of respect. So you do it because you respect them, not because you're scared of them or you think you're going to lose your job. It's a totally different dynamic, that. And I guess the same for parenting, isn't it? Is all of you are a team and you all bring something to the table. Is that a dynamic that you attune to?
It's funny, actually. I did a post a couple of years ago on the family unit working as a sports team, and who everybody was. I mean, I might dig it up and send it to you, but that was such a cute one. And the other way that I've framed it actually during this COVID period is looking at the family unit as a little community. And, to echo the same sentiments that you've just said, is that everybody plays their part. There's an extra load on me now with, I'm wanting to continue to do my stuff, but I've also got everybody at home all the time now. And so, my teenagers, they're stepping up and they're helping out more. They're helping out with looking after my younger ones. My older one, she has her license and she'll go to the shops for me. So I think that that's another way to view it, as your family unit is a little community where you do work together and support each other, and to have open and honest communication. Everything that you're teaching your son, I think it's terribly important to give them that language, the language of emotions. Why is that not, say, taught at school as a fundamental? Because that's extremely powerful when you're able to express yourself like that. And your little guy is also, he's far better at self-soothing or being able to regulate his emotions in his behavior because you've actually given him the language.
We said to him, like, this is a classic. So I've used this example on nearly every show. I'm just going to do it again because this might be the first time someone's listened to a show. But we kind of explained to him what emotions were and how they could be held in different parts of the body. And as soon as you name them and give them colors and shapes, it's a really nice way to kind of become self-aware without it being too intense. So he now comes up to us and he'll say, "Mummy, feeling a bit angry." And we're like, "Oh, okay, that's okay. It's okay to be angry. So where in your body is it?" And then he may say, "Oh, it's in my chest." We go, "Okay. What color is it?" And he'll say blue. And then we'll say, "Ezra, what would you like us to do for you? How can we help you with your anger? How can you help yourself with your anger?" And he'll say, "Fill it with love."
Oh,
he says.
So cute.
We told him how powerful love is. And, because I don't live with them, so we always tell him that no matter where he is, Owen and my partner will be sending him love. It's always been sending. He can take it all in. And now he says to us, if he can tell that I'm a little bit stressed from work or something, a little bit low or whatever, he's so attuned. He'll say, Owie, I'm sending you love. I mean, this is a 4-year-old that's aware enough to see that my nervous system's slightly out. And we taught him that that's a dynamic, that he's as powerful as we are. He should understand that. And he also said to my partner the other day, I have to mention this because it was amazing. I don't know if I shared it on my page, but my partner lost her dad quite young. So Ezra looked up at the wall, and this is an amazing montage of design work that her dad did. It's beautiful, beautiful piece. And Ezra looks up and says, Mummy, even though Daddy is gone, if you want, I can be your daddy if you like. Because he's so aware that the need for love and the need for connection to care for each other. And even though he has tantrums and says he hates us and all that, that's fine. That's normal. But he knows that when it all ends, we're going to give him a big old hug. So he knows that the final result of that tantrum will be him getting love. He will not be shamed for his behavior or rejected either. So I just wanted to say that because all parents need to realize that their kids they're sponges, but don't take it for granted. You know, if there's an adult lesson to learn and it's done really safely, it can really help their development, but also remaining, them as a child. You don't want them to grow up too quick, like happened with you, for instance. So from kind of all of the parenting tips you've been sharing out and stuff, like what other insights? I'm going to let you just go for it now. Is there anything you would like to share with the audience about parenting and anything really that you feel is useful? Go for it. I will sit back and listen.
Something else that I'm actually very mindful of at the moment is being a little bit more into the process rather than the outcome. Everything nowadays is measured. Even our steps are being measured. And I see this with my son because I'm doing his driving hours. In Australia, if you when you get your license to be able to drive on your own, you need to have done 120 learner hours next door to a full licensed driver. So we're somewhere around 32 hours, and a lot of people are very destination oriented. And I've said to my son, we are going to get there. His sister got there. I want you to be more involved in the process rather than worrying about the destination so much. And there's a lot of talking about pausing. There's a lot of talking about mindfulness. There's a lot of talking about being in the moment and being in the present. And I think if we can be a little bit more involved in the process rather than being so outcome oriented, that can help with that as well. I'm not suggesting that you entirely lose sight of the end goal, but not to the extent that you just can't be in the process. That's something that's in my mind at the moment, also because I'm actually teaching him to drive a manual car. So the whole process is very much slowed down. And so for a 16-year-old boy, that's also very, very hard. And he's still at the destination. But I'm saying, no. This may take us even longer. Let's just stick with the process. Something that I do find a useful tool it's called the circle of security. And you've spoken about this a lot already as well. And you can just Google it. And basically, it's just the fundamentals which we try to offer our children: a secure base and a safe haven where we delight in seeing them. We help them to organize their feelings, but we also provide the boundaries and the limits within which we deem is appropriate. And being permissive, I mean, that's another thing that I've written about, is your parenting style. So there's authoritative, which is the most desirable parenting style, which comes with limits and boundaries as well as a warm and loving, caring environment. Then there's authoritarian, which is kind of like a military dictator, which is not great. And then there's permissive. So I think, and again, your listeners can look up an authoritative parenting style, and that's definitely a useful one to hang on to as well.
Yeah, I guess your parenting styles may shift and change depending on their age. Like you said, things develop. And, I think being aware of your child's self-regulation tools, interaction with themselves, starts to pick up on that, get feedback from what you can see they're up to, and then think, okay, how can I help them shape that differently? But this takes a level of time, doesn't it? A level of time, persistence, patience, which unfortunately in this day and age kind of goes out the window, doesn't it? And I'm hoping this lockdown may allow people to spend some time to really hone in on the deep connection that they have with their children. I know for single parents right now, it must be so tough to not be able to get support either coming into your household. It must be tough. Incredibly
tough. And I think that parents, I have also written about what does a family look like. And I don't think you can, the old days of a nuclear family or a husband and wife, may as well throw that one out of the window, I think. There's, blended families that's what a family looks like. Whatever way, shape or form it takes in your house is how your family looks. And but for single parents, they often feel isolated, but this is a time that they've just felt extraordinarily isolated. And then they've got financial stress on top of that with, work, losing jobs and things like that. And then the homeschooling, it's put a tremendous amount of pressure onto parents.
Yeah, certainly. And I haven't seen my stepson for 8 weeks now in this pandemic. And it's tough. But we obviously got a good enough connection that he says, he misses me every day and he can't wait to see me. It doesn't feel like he is getting adversely affected necessarily, but now we're seeing that he doesn't want to speak to me on the phone anymore because we know he's obviously finding that too hard. And this is coming back to intelligence again. He knows it's too painful to speak to me on the phone because it reminds him that's how emotionally intelligent kids can be at that point. And we can see that. And if you really start to pick up on their patterns and their behaviors and their choices, you can go, okay, wow. And you can stop any of these ruptures occurring, these traumatic ruptures from lack of attachment or whatever. And it's our duty, I think, to look for those ruptures because they're going to happen anyway. They could get punched by someone at nursery, and that's a rupture. And they may be scared of that boy again, mightn't they, or that girl again. And it's our job to help them through that process of moving through that trauma, because otherwise you've got these little mini traumas, and they say that, don't they, developmental trauma, where it's lots of little abandonment bits or lack of attachment, and it really impacts our adult ability to attach to adult partners, and then those two adult partners that are struggling then have a child. That's not a good dynamic. You've got probably three nervous systems there, which aren't going to be kind of aligned.
I truly believe they're doing their very, very best under often incredibly difficult circumstances with their own stuff that they're trying to carry and trying to manage, as well as being in a difficult situation. I do give parents a lot of credit for everything that they're trying to hold a lot of balls up in the air, quite frankly.
Yeah, we quite often say, I've said on a few other shows, that a lot of us are doing the best we can with the resources we have in this moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. We are doing the best we can. And if you're really, really struggling, you're still doing the best you can. If you're in fight and flight, shut down from a polyvagal perspective, stressed out, pressurized, you've only got the resources you've got because that's what you've developed and learned from other people and from your parents. And I think that's why it's so important to really focus on our own personal development journey, rather than focusing on how to parent, focus on how to process your own stuff. So the parenting comes naturally. But I just think we get very stuck, don't we, in our stories and our narrative and our fears, but also our joys, the things that we love. Because I'm sure that with a lot of parents, there may even be a bit of resentment, which is really, really sad. But that's kind of natural too. If there's lots of things that you love to do, but you can't now because you have a child, it's balancing that resentment and making peace with it and letting it go and diving into what you're doing and keeping those little things that you love sort of in the background, still ticking along. But it is a very complex issue. Today I just want to stress that, everyone's doing their best. I'm sure they are. We're not demonizing anyone right now. This is all very, very loving. And that's why I think having platforms like yours for Instagram and your article, and obviously the stuff that Man Cove Wellbeing's doing we've got a whole series of the common adaptations of childhood trauma. So we've done 9 videos on that, personality traits that come from that. So it could be aggression, passive aggressive, it can be codependency, addiction. There's lots of things that we use as tools for traumas that we've had as a kid. And it's stopping that loop and passing it on to our children. That's the trickiest bit. But this has been amazing. And I'm not sure, I feel like we've covered enough as far as trauma related to parenting. But I really wanted this first episode, I'm sure we'll do stuff again together, but I really wanted to cover sort of the parenting journey too, and we shared a bit about our own stories too, which is really, really powerful. But is there anything else that you feel may be important before we go today?
I think we've covered, pretty much everything. I mean, the only other thing was, I think that if things are becoming really bad, is for parents to find a way to give themselves a break. I mean, sometimes if I'm super stressed, I tell my children I'm timing myself out because I just need a break, and I just go to the back garden or shut myself in one of the bedrooms or something, and just give yourself that 5 or 10 minutes. And with the homeschooling thing, there were a lot of parents at my local school who were becoming very, very stressed about the amount that we were supposed to be submitting and the amount that we were supposed to be getting through with the children. And I said, why not just stick with the basics? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Just for these 8 weeks that we've been in lockdown, just stick with the basics. Have a common sense approach. You don't need to absolutely do everything. If you're sleeping right, if you're exercising right, if you've got a bit of time to play and time to work, you are literally covering all the bases. And a little bit of time, play, catching up with your friends, making the time for a house party or a Zoom. Or the other thing that my youngest was doing, which was super cute with her friends, was they were writing each other notes, and the parents were doing a little drop-off. And these kids were because that's the old-fashioned way, they were so super thrilled to get something in the letterbox. And that's reading, that's writing, with a beautiful practical application. My next article is on play-based learning, which is a really fantastic part of the educational literature. And, we've had the International Space Station fly across the Sydney skies recently. And we just had this amazing STEM project with my younger 2, all about the International Space Station. We were looking at compass points. We were looking at where on the map we could see it, how far up the horizon it comes. And then we'd go to the local park at 5:30 or 6 in the evening. And we were able to spot it flying over the horizon. Have some fun with it. We're measuring things. We're taking things all so seriously. We're going for the outcome. Sit happily in the process. And if you're doing something like that, that's still learning. Yeah,
certainly. And like you said, from the play perspective, because they say how powerful play is for learning too. And people, I think, is it kinesthetic? When people learn while they're moving, it's easier for them to absorb information when they're moving. Yeah, and I'm like that. So if I listen to an audiobook, if I go for a run and I listen to an audiobook, I retain way more information than if I listen to it on my bed. So it's interesting, isn't it, how we all learn different ways, but play is huge, especially for the safe and social aspect of our, development. And, kids need to feel safe and need to feel safe in a socialized concept, with a group, with a tribe, to feel accepted. And that dynamic can really be nurtured in families if you can get it right. And I'm talking about extended family too, grandparents and cousins and friends next door, building that community for a child where they've got lots of different people they can turn to for different stuff, will allow them to really develop well. And it's not easy, obviously, to create that kind of life. But
that's not available to, that's sort of not available to everybody. We don't see a lot of our extended family. So our unit here at home is really the core, as well as friends that we've made in the community. So I think that picture looks quite different for different families, and it's something that it's I've really lamented over the years that we haven't had that available to us. It's been really tough, but we've sort of come to a place of acceptance.
It's kind of like building that tribe in whatever way that looks. It could be just your immediate family. It could be extended family. It could just be friends. It's just having a tribe is kind of wide in us, isn't it? And I find that with all the projects I've done over the years, especially with Man Cove as well, that I'm starting to build this really beautiful tribe around me. And we're all equal. I host the shows, but we're all equal, and there's no hierarchy or anything like that. And it's just humans with the common interests, with the same passion. And again, this is not easy for everybody, especially if you're heavily traumatized and connection is your biggest trigger, or love is your biggest trigger. That's where it gets very complicated, because the one primal need that you require is the one thing that triggers you. And it's those people that I think this is what this is for. We're trying to help those people kind of self-inform themselves, maybe start some self-regulation so they can be ready to start to connect to others. And this applies to kids, I'm sure, in the foster system that have just been going from house to house and never been able to have a tribe or connect to anyone specifically. And it's not as easy as we can describe it, but it's a human need. And that's why I think it's so important to look after our neighbours if we can.
Well, they're saying at the moment that loneliness is our greatest illness. And loneliness is at epidemic levels. It's at epidemic proportions. And the antidote to loneliness is connections, meaningful connections, deep connections, intimacy, trust. And so in whichever way that you can build that, it's very preserving.
We talked about connections on, I think it was the interview I did with Kieran. We were talking about how when it comes to connections, it's not always about 100% about people either. It's also about what in your life do you feel really connected to, because that is a form of connection and it's something that should be harnessed. And in The Body Keeps the Score, he said this amazing thing about music. And I've said this a few times on shows, and I'll say it again. Is that when you listen to a piece of music that you really love, or an album or an artist, try and think about it. Okay, a human being wrote this piece of music. You love this piece of music. You are connected to that human being by association, because you are really investing in somebody else's voice or creativity or expression, and you're finding joy in that. That is a form of connection to another human being. So it's not as simple as having a friend that's going to come round. It's like what in your life has been created by a human being and you love it. That is a form of connection, and build from there, because there is a sense of safety there. I think that's why music's so powerful. And I felt that from a connection standpoint, that was a really powerful thing for me to hear, because I just never thought about it that way. Is that when you're listening to a piece of music that's sung by a human being, you are connecting. And that's very, very beautiful. And it's the same for kids, if there's certain things that, set their soul on fire and you can tell, it's like, make sure you do that as much as you can, because it's going to really help them process anything that happens to them, because they know what makes them feel safe and amazing and awesome. And it doesn't have to be people always, but I just think it's really important to tune in to our children. And I just want to say one last point, see what you think on it, which is about vulnerability. And we know how important vulnerability is anyway for the healing process, to be heard, to be seen, to be understood. But also I think showing vulnerability to your children is also very powerful for them, to see their caregiver be a bit vulnerable, so they know it's okay, and also give them the power to help you, even no matter how age they are. So, if my little one can tell that I'm just absolutely exhausted and I can't play, we've been playing for 6 hours, but I'm on my knees, I'll just say, sorry, Ezra, we really needs to have a rest here. And he'll go, oh, that's okay. And then he'll go, I'll sit with you, or he goes, oh, let's go and watch telly together. And then we'll go and sit down. It gives him it empowers him to care for me. There is nothing wrong with that at all. That is beautiful. We're giving them parental skills already to be able to do that. And it's done in a healthy way, not in a, oh my God, my kid's caring for me way.
Well, with our children, we're always wanting to model the behaviour that we're looking for in them. So when you express yourself in those clear terms, you are giving him the permission and the roadmap to be able to do that for himself. you've actually given him the words to be able to do it. So I think it's very powerful. And to acknowledge in ourselves, we're not superhuman. I've written also a lot about good enough parenting, that striving for perfection is utterly ridiculous, and you'll feel depleted, and it's unattainable. So if we can accept in ourselves and express in a non-aggressive and non-judgmental way how we're feeling, and that mummy's had a hard day, I'm upset about something, because sometimes my kids will come to me with something, but I've got something else on my mind that's really troubling me, and I'll just say, look, I'm sorry, I need to get through this right now because I'm feeling upset about it. I'm going to come back to you in another half hour or an hour once I've got through what I have to get through. And they're like, oh yeah, that's sweet. She's not upset with me. So we're wanting to model for our children how we want them to behave later on. And I think that just giving them the words, that they can express themselves freely and safely like that is a very powerful tool.
Yes, lovely. It kind of ties in what we sort of start this whole thing with, which is safety and connection. Put those two together and you're onto a winner, I think. Safe connection and being able to express yourself in a way that, like you said, they can observe. They're very observant. So if you can let them observe what you're up to, so with your partner too, make sure that you're always displaying a level of care and understanding towards your adult partner, so they can see that when they're on the other side of the room and see that that's a human interaction that is important. This is a very complicated situation, but I'm feeling today that we've hopefully made it feel a little bit more manageable, a little bit more understanding. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I know you're going to be getting more involved with me and Bethany with Parent Path on our magazine show of this. So it's little mini segments. And it'd be great for you, me and Bethany, just talking about from our own personal parenting more than anything else. And there'll be little segments so people can find out a lot more about, what we're up to and things there. So which is great. So what's next for you, Sarah? What's the future look like for you, do you think? Especially when the kids all go off somewhere and find partners. What does life look like?
I don't know. I might further my study. Probably, I don't know, travel the world with my husband. Care for my grandkiddies. Give my children parenting tips. Yeah. Well, hopefully I'm not going to be a grandmother for 10 years. It's funny. Probably when my eldest might start having kids will be when my youngest graduates high school. So, it's all good fun. I think the other thing is another word that I really do love is being authentic. And life's just not pretty. life's not pretty a lot of the time. And if we can just be as authentic and genuine as possible, it also helps for our children to see what that looks like. And the other thing that I think is important is that parents and adults is, you do just need to keep a little bit of something for yourself. Whatever it is that you love doing, if you love going out for a walk, if you love going out for a run, if you love reading, if you love listening to music, as you spoke about with Kieran, you must hang on to that. Without and actually the creative arts is a really great place to turn to. But if you can't carve out a small amount of time for yourself, you're going to end up burned out and resentful. So I do encourage parents to do that. I understand that parents are stressed and that they have a lot on their plate, but a little bit of time for yourself, and if it can involve something that's fun, it's going to be really helpful in the long term.
Definitely. It's kind of going back to self-regulation, co-regulation again, to be able to co-regulate with your child and show them how to self-regulate. You need to know how to self-regulate, which you really can't show them that. And I know for single parents, it's so difficult to pull that off. But I know my partner is a mindfulness teacher. she'll always maintain her meditation practice. So if she can do 10-minute meditation at the end of the day, once he's gone to bed, then that will give her nervous system a little bit of love. And you just, like you said, you've got to squeeze it in somewhere, because if you can better co-regulate your child, they're going to have better self-regulation as they grow up. So they won't become so dependent on you all the time. You empower them with self-regulation. So if you do it right now, it could really pay off 5 years from now, self-regulation.
Well, that's the whole idea of parenting, is to help our children launch, to be independent and to be autonomous. That's the aim of the game. It's not to hold on to them and have them dependent on us. That's not right.
And you really get to see that. You really get to see that team dynamic much later, don't you? So when they're in their mid-20s, and then you're going out for family dinners or you're going out for trips or whatever, then you can really see how that team dynamic developed over those years. Everybody is doing their bit, rather than you continually looking after your child even when they're 30 in that kind of dependent way.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a whole literature on failure to launch, which is, it's quite a devastating outcome, to be honest. Kids in their 20s who still live at home and they've never had a job. It's good for them to have that independence and to be autonomous. So, I think that's definitely something to keep in mind for the future.
Definitely. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I hope this was of value.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Before we go, so if you just want to repeat your Instagram username again so people can find you. I will put links to everything, but just let us know where we can find you online if people want to.
Thank you. So the main platform is on Instagram _parentingtips_, and all my material is there, which includes my articles with Sydney Observer. There's links to all of that, and you can see the issues online. So, well, you can find me on Facebook, but then it's lots and lots of pictures of my animals. So, and where I walk. So Instagram is the main platform where I share my parenting tips.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. This was episode 5. I've got a lot of people lined up. I can't tell the audience who that next person is, because it's currently editing festival at my place while we're in lockdown. But this will be out as part of the Mental Health Awareness Week. So I hope everybody has been getting value from this particular week. I'm not sure if that's a global thing. Is it a global thing? Do you have Mental Health Awareness Week over there? Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of it, sorry.
Maybe it's a Britain thing then. I'll have to find out.
Okay.
But yeah, either way, it's Mental Health Awareness Week here, so we're going to release a podcast every single day, and this has been released towards the end of that week. So thank you for being part of that too.
Thank you.
This is a very, very important time of lockdown. So thank you, Sarah, and look forward to working with you on the magazine show.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for listening at home, and we will see you next time for another trauma chat. Thank you very much, and take care.